living room. Welcome to the living room. Welcome to the living room where real conversations take place. Hello, you far too kind. It's a place where you could come to say what's on your mind. Come and spend some time. It's a family show. Place where we deal with reality. So real topics, what's poppin', no stopping. Just make sure you watching. This is a show for entrepreneurs and for those who clockin'. Black people, brown people, Af people. This culture, we're supposed to support one another. Let love take over in the living room. It's the living room. Welcome to the living room. Welcome to the living room where real conversations take place. It's the living room.
Well, good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for tuning in once again to the living room. That's right, I'm back. It's your boy, the Bishop, every week, every Tuesday, right here, same channel. Listen, we have a loaded conversation on this evening. So loaded, I had to get my red folder out because our topic today is how to get into good trouble. And if there's anybody who know how to get into good trouble, it's these two individuals that I have with me tonight that's going to break some science down for us so that we all can participate in doing, make an impact in this world. But while you're here on Facebook, if you hear something that you liked, we want you to hit that like button. If you hear something that you love, go ahead and hit that heart button. If something makes you laugh, you know, that laugh icon, go ahead and throw it out there. But most of all, we want you to chat along with us. Throw some questions out, put something in the comments. We're right here on Facebook and on YouTube. Now, before we get into our great dialogue tonight, we have with us the best band in town. That's right. We have the Living Room Band. Give it up for Darren Brown and the Living Room Band, and we'll be right back. Give it up one more time for the Living Room Band. And if you want to invite them to any of your special event, you have a wedding ceremony or a reception, or if you just having a backyard bash, get in contact with the Living Room Band. You can DM us. I'm learning that new stuff that they call DM. You can direct mail us on the Living Room. Well, let me introduce my guest today. He is no stranger to the Living Room, and he is an author, former Civil Rights Director, Office of the Maryland Attorney General, 3-term member of the Annapolis City Council, and he is the convener of the Caucus of African American Leaders. Will you help me welcome right here in the living room where real conversations take place, the Honorable Carl O. Snowden. Welcome once again.
Bishop, thank you, Bishop.
Once again on the living room. I can just let you go ahead and throw some stuff out there on it, and that'll be enough right there. But I had to bring in another big wheel. all right, to make this trifecta conversation for this evening. We have tonight, for the first time on the living room, and I believe it won't be his last time, he is the second vice president of the NAACP and Anne Arundel County chapter and chair of its Criminal Justice Committee. Also spiritual leader and co-chair of the Judicial Subcommittee of the Caucus of African American Leaders. 36 years in the education and practice of law, running an exclusive law office in Baltimore City, focusing principally on the legal needs of church people. I can pause right there. All right. Also, chair of the National Bar Association's Law and Religion section. He is the pastor of a traditional Baptist church for nearly 20 years in Columbia, Maryland. The name of the ministry is Living Exactly Like Jesus Baptist Church. You need to put your hands together and help me welcome the Reverend Dr. Ricky Nelson Jones, Esquire. He's giving it up to Jesus, right? All right, men of God, I have you here tonight, and really what I love about it is that I just snatched you up on call, right? Just like, because we have a big event that we're going to talk about a little bit later on the show. But first of all, and even surrounding the event, there's a name that we want to have resounding in the ears of everyone tonight that's watching the show, and that name is Congressman John Lewis. And the reason why I want everybody to remember his name is because of all the wonderful work that he did down through the years, even during the civil rights movement when he was about, 15, 16 years old?
Young man.
Even unto his last breath, he was doing instrumental and key work. And so Congressman John Lewis should never be forgotten for what he has done. Now, he has a famous statement that he had made, and that statement was about us getting into good trouble. We've never heard something like that in all our lives. Say good trouble. I know what bad trouble is. Brother Carl, I really know what bad trouble is. And my mama would remind me what a wet dish rag or a broom, whatever was first near to her, told me to go get my own switch. So
Come on.
So I know about bad trouble, but Congressman Lewis said we can get into good trouble, and it's necessary for us to do it. So now I want to hear it from the best, and that is the activist himself that's mentoring me these few years or so. And so, Carl, if you can explain to the viewing audience, in your own words, what did Congressman John Lewis mean by getting into good trouble?
Well, before I do that, let me thank you and Reverend Jones. You know, it's important for ministers to be involved in empowering and enlightening the community. You, in your role as Vice President of United Black Clergy, along with Apostle Larry Lee Thomas, have just done a phenomenal job. Reverend Jones, working hand in hand with Madam President Jackie Alsop, has done just a great job. And you have been part of this getting in good trouble. John Lewis, I happen to have had the opportunity to meet. John Lewis died at the age of 80. John Lewis, in 2013, a group of us went to meet with him because we were going to build a memorial to the Civil Rights Foot Soldiers Memorial. It's in Annapolis. And that memorial was designed to honor men and women that, frankly, most people will never know. They were the men and women who took the time and made the sacrifice to make life better for all of us. John Lewis wanted to do what the two of you are doing. His wish was, he wanted to be a preacher. And he would absolutely he was from Alabama, a place called Troy, Alabama. And what he would do is go out into his yard, and there were chickens, hens, in the yard. And he would preach to the chickens. It's how he got his start at public speaking. He heard Martin Luther King Jr. at the age of 15. Dr. King was a great orator, as you know. And this Alabama guy heard the preaching and heard the dream. And he said it affected him tremendously.
Wow.
And what made him so famous was at the tender age of 22. He was walking across a bridge in Selma, Alabama, and some state troopers, Alabama state troopers, without giving any warning, went in and drove horses and started using these batons. And one of the batons hit him in the head and knocked him unconscious. He went into a coma, and many thought he would never survive that. But as a result of him being beaten down, he literally spilled his blood for the people, for the right of people to vote. And his whole life was changed. He went from wanting to be a preacher to becoming a politician. He would run against a well-known activist at the time, a guy named Julian Bond. Julian Bond was eloquent, he was handsome, he was well-educated, well-spoken. You contrast that with John Lewis, who was not as eloquent, who was not as articulate. But John Lewis said something on that occasion when he was running in Atlanta for Congress. He said, you have a choice. You can pick a show horse or you can pick a workhorse. I'm the workhorse. Wow. I'm not going to be I'm just going to work. And the voters of the 5th District voted him in. He was in Congress for 20 years.
Wow.
And he never lost his desire to be the conscience of the country. And I end with this on him that I think is so important for people to know. When Martin Luther King Jr. was murdered in 1968, John Lewis felt that his whole life had come to an end because he put a lot of love and respect for King. And he said that he literally, when Dr. King died, literally thought it was over with. The world was going to come to an end. But it was his mother, who was still living, who told him that if you really love Dr. King, if you really admire Dr. King, then you have to pick up the baton. You have to do what Dr. King wants you to do. Keep marching. And he kept marching. And his last speech was about good trouble, where he told young people and older people, get in good trouble. When you get in the way, you get arrested for the right causes, that's good trouble. And he compared his good trouble to kind of good trouble Jesus got in.
Okay, now. That Jesus got in a whole lot of good trouble.
Good trouble. He went to jail, as you know.
Right, right. I went, but it wasn't for good trouble. But that's a whole other story we can talk about on the side there, Brother Carl. But that's an excellent historical backdrop that you've given us for Congressman Lewis. I really had never really, really researched and digged into his life. But once he did pass away, we was able to say, well, who is this guy that the world is cheering on? And so I was able to do some research and see that he did some phenomenal things. And then especially like at the early age and being there on that bridge and from that point. And I don't know if it was Malcolm X, and I think you might have made this quote before about, when you get beat down or, you got two options.
That's right. This Malcolm X is a great, really is worth repeating. Reverend Malcolm X once said this: if a man knocks you down for no reason, unprovoked, just knock you down. You didn't do anything to him, he knocked you down. He said you got two options. You can wait for the man who knocked you down to help you up, or you can get up. Malcolm said our problem is too many of us waiting for the man who knocked us down to help us up. Get up on your own feet, Malcolm would say. And Malcolm had a brilliant analysis. By the way, Malcolm met John Lewis. John Lewis was traveling in Africa as a student. He was part of what was called a Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. And a group of them went to Africa. And by sheer coincidence ran into Malcolm X, who was in there at the same time. And Malcolm spoke to them regarding civil rights and the movement at that time in 1964. And for people who don't know, in 1964, there was no Voting Rights Act. That would come in 1965. And there were, before 1964, there were less than 10,000 black elected officials in the country. And to give some people some perspective on that, only 5 African-American congresspersons You compare that to what we have today, over 50 plus 2 United States senators, it's been a huge change. Right. And that would not have been possible without people like John Lewis and Andy Young and Jesse Jackson and Dr. King and Malcolm and Fannie Lou Hamer and Ella Baker and just so many men and women who made the sacrifice. Some of them died.
I would love for you, Carl, and you may even do this. I think you hit I remember saying something where you were teaching at the community college. But I would love for you, perhaps we can take 1 or 2 Saturdays and have you really teach us some history here, African American history that ourselves and our kids may not even know.
In fact, one of the things, Bishop and Reverend Jones, one of the things I really think that the ministry can do, we have Sunday school, right? Sunday school teaches our children, our people, but religious history and ritual. We should have Saturday school. Jews understand something very fundamental. There is history that's going to be taught in secular schools, but there's our history that we must teach from our perspective. When we tell our history, tell our story, it ought to come out of the mouths of men and women who had the experience. It takes nothing from the school system, but the school system will never appreciate who really John Lewis was, because they didn't have that experience. They will tell you that Malcolm was a radical when we recognize that what Malcolm was a hero. So we need these schools, and I'm hoping churches and mosques and others will think about holding special Saturday classes where we get a chance to talk to our children, in particular, and our youth, about this great history we have. The vast majority of people who are watching tonight, if I were to mention the name James Madison, they would know that James Madison was one of the founding fathers, helped to do the Federalist Papers. If I mentioned George Washington, they would automatically know he was the father of the country, he was the first president. But if I said, who was Madison Washington? Madison Washington, most people have no idea. And if they were to Google right now Madison Washington, what they would soon discover, Madison Washington liberated more black people than Abraham Lincoln. And we don't know that.
Right.
Madison Washington, this black man, got his freedom by taking over a mutiny. He created a mutiny and took over a ship and freed black people.
Wow.
Black people.
Wow. Man, that's
and
amazing.
You don't get that history, right?
Right.
Nobody tells you who Madison Washington was.
Right, that's amazing history. So the Reverend Doctor is here with us, Carl. and Reverend, if you could just, in your own words, when you hear that statement, getting into good trouble, what comes to your mind about that?
First of all, thank you, Bishop, for this opportunity to speak. I'm always fascinated by Mr. Snowden's rich knowledge of history.
Yes.
And he shared something with me today I didn't know, and that's John Lewis wanted to be a preacher. And I didn't know that.
You're right.
So that's good to know. That's in addition to things I knew about him, I didn't know that piece. And thank God for that. Obviously, I read on John Lewis, and I discovered that there were like 5, so to speak, pillars that capsulized what he was talking about when he said good trouble. Always vote, number 1. You're never too young to make a difference. Speak truth to power. Be a racial equity broker. And the last thing I believe, never give up. That's it, never give up. But this part that caught my attention was be a racial equity broker.
Yeah.
When I was reading, he was talking about how, he was involved in the movement. He was speaking for people who could not speak. He was putting his life on the line. He said, because who else is going to do that? If we don't do it, we the ones in trouble.
Right.
And then he said he learned that when you're out there and you're speaking for people who can't speak, and you're striving to bring light to this dark world, he said, at some point it dawns on you that you have got to get at the table or you on the menu.
Wow.
He said, so once you become a racial equity broker and you speak for people, he said the next logical step for him was to get involved with the decision makers. Hence, he became a great politician. Right. And I thought that was so critically important. And this is the reason why, Bishop, that I have been applying for judicial vacancies, even recently.
Right.
I've applied for a judicial vacancy in this state probably about 8, 9 times.
Wow.
And you know why I've done that? And when he said about never give up, the reason why I've done that, and I said this to the Judicial Nominating Commission I was there, I said, one day, y'all gonna let objective criteria govern. I said, my law office did research. There's never been a judge to sit on the circuit court for Anne Arundel County who has ever appeared before you, having practiced 30 years in 15 different areas of the law. State court, federal court, New York, New Jersey, Ohio, Louisiana, Tennessee, all these things around the country, who has written articles that have been published nationwide, legal articles 5 times, and who has served as a continuing legal education instructor or organizer 10 times.
Wow.
I say no one who's ever sat on this bench had this type of qualifications when he walked up here. But I can't get a recommendation to the governor.
Wow.
But you recommend a Caucasian with a year and a half of legal experience in private practice, and as you get put on the bench. So never give up.
Right.
What he's talking about. You got to be with the decision makers, not simply be on the menu. So I continue to apply so that in God's perfect timing, when they get on the bench, they let justice roll down like a waterfall.
And righteousness.
Like a mighty stream.
Yes,
and
sir.
so we've got to that point he made. I thought that was a powerful point. He said, it's all right, you speak for people. You get out there, you fight for them. He said, but at some point it's going to dawn on you. If you're not making the decisions, you're on the menu. And so at some point we cannot get discouraged. No matter how many times they say no. That's right. Somebody depending on a righteous man getting on the bench.
Right.
And so I thought that stood out to me when I was doing my reading about him.
No, that's excellent. Can you give us those 5 real quick, just in case somebody is, and if you're hearing this in the, on Facebook, you can put it right in the chat so that others could hear it, or if those that may be just jumping on can see exactly what we've been talking about. So here, so Congressman John Lewis, and so you had 5 points there, key points about good trouble.
Yeah, good trouble. Always vote.
Always vote.
You're never too young to make a difference.
Right. Never too young to make a difference.
He said, speak truth to power.
Speak truth to power.
Yeah. He said, become a racial equity broker.
Become a racial equity broker.
And never give up.
And never give up.
Yes.
Oh, man, that's powerful. I mean, that right now, all in itself could, you could write a book expounding and elaborating on those 5 points right there. I might do that anyway, huh, Carl? No, I'll let Carl write it. I'll go ahead and publish it for him. But that's excellent information. Gentlemen, I'm getting, I get excited and emotional at the same time when we're talking about advocacy and activism and those who've already pioneered and did strong work for our communities and for the nation. And Carl, you coined the phrase "Aluta continua," that the struggle continues. And with that, and you tie in the good trouble, it kind of relate, because I think that birth from out of you being in good trouble, getting in good trouble and getting in the way of some stuff that's not right. So talk to us about some of your experiences along the way.
One of the things that I was very fortunate, my mother lived to be 104 years old.
Wow.
This month marks the first anniversary of her passing. But in 104 years, she saw a lot in life.
Yeah.
And she had this incredible wisdom. Now remember, this is a woman that was born before women had the right to vote. This is a person who was able to see all these tremendous changes occur in her lifetime. And she was a strong proponent of not just the concept of never giving up, but never giving up on God. She was incredible. I used to remember as a young boy, when there were troubles, everybody else be in bed sleep, and if you was quiet enough, you could hear her praying. It was never but her. It was always but some member of the family who was having some kind of problem. And I remember this incident, which it was like it was yesterday. Where we are now is in Odenton, Maryland, but not far from here is a place called Davisonville, Maryland. And we grew up on a farm. And I lived with my grandfather, and which was her father. It was this farm. And I had a little friend, little boy. He was 5 years old. His name was Tommy. Tommy and I were inseparable, best friends. And Tommy, father was a sharecropper. Reverend Jones know what a sharecropper was or is. I didn't know what a sharecropper was. I was 5 years old. And all I used to see Tommy's father do was this amazing thing. Tommy's father would put a plow literally on his back and plow up a field.
Right.
No horse, a plow up the field.
Wow.
I would see his father take a axe and cut up wood. He was just an incredible guy. And when you saw him, his name was Mr. Marshall. When you saw Tommy's father, he had these biceps, these muscles. His vocation and avocation was the same thing, hard work. He was just one of these kind of guys that didn't say much, but 6'3", tall black man, muscular. And Tommy admired his father, admired him greatly. Tommy admired his father so much, one day Tommy said, my father can beat your father. And if someone could beat my father, it probably was Tommy's father. I never admitted it. Then one day he had the audacity to say that his father was so strong that he could beat Superman. When I was growing up, Superman was this incredible being. But secretly, if anybody could beat Superman, it would be Tommy's father. And Tommy's father he just commanded respect. Whatever you were doing, he didn't say much, but he said, stop. Whatever you're doing, you stop. One day, Tommy and I were playing in the field, as we often did in the woods. It was a hot, sweltering August summer day. Never will forget it. Just playing in the woods, doing what little boys do. And this man who works for Tommy's father's boss came walking down from what was called the big house, chewing tobacco. In those days, people chewed tobacco. But he was angry, and we couldn't figure out what was going on. He just was so angry. And in those days, kids were not to get in grown adults' business.
Right.
You just didn't. You just didn't do that.
Sure.
But Tommy and I wanted to know what was going on. So Tommy and I hurried down to his house, Tommy's house. There were some bushes, and we hid in these bushes so we could see what was going on, but they couldn't see us. And this man came to Tommy's father's house, knocked on the door. Tommy's mother answered the door. And he says, where's Marshall? And the woman said, he's sick, boss, he's sick. Pushed her aside, went in. There's this cacophony of sound. It looked like it was eternal, but it was just a few moments. And shortly out of the house came Tommy's father, half dressed, no shoes, no shirt on, followed by Mr. Rossback. And he told him in no uncertain terms, nigga, if you don't come to work today, I want you off of my land and out of my house. He, Tommy's father, went to protest, and he shoved Tommy's father, catching him off balance. Tommy's father falls down to the ground, and he spit on him. For me, the world came to a halt, because I knew what Tommy's father could do. I knew his power. But Tommy's father did something altogether different. I've never forgotten it to this day. When Tommy's father got up after this man had spat upon him, he says, I said, sorry, boss. Don't fire me. Let me go to work. Now, I understand the sociology. I know people will tell me, well, Carl, you got to remember this is before black people had certain rights and all of that. But children don't understand that.
Right.
They don't understand that. And I will never forget this as long as I live. His father was getting up, and as he was getting up after being shoved down, he looked right at us. We were hiding in the bushes. Tommy was crying profusely, and so was I. And that was the first experience that I had with raw racism. Unfiltered racism, the kind of stuff that leaves this lasting impression. Tommy never again, ever, told me that his father was stronger than my father. And Mr. Marshall never walked again with the same kind of commanding presence. Sure. So I say all that to say that that experience was an experience that left a major impact. And my mother, who did not want me to be bitter, but better, tried to convince me what I saw I didn't see, because it was like so many black parents of that day. She didn't want me to believe that what I had just witnessed was this man embarrassing his wife, the emasculation of his manhood, the humiliation of this man in front of his children and his son's best friend. And my mother kept telling me. Well, I end this by simply saying, I remember as 5 years old saying, I'm never gonna let nobody do that to me. Nobody.
And Bishop, could I jump in here just on the tail end of this? Because one of the things I want to talk about from my personal perspective on Good Trouble, in addition to those 5 pillars that John Lewis shared, but I think our community has such a rich and deep history in ministry in the church. When our great-great-great-grandparents labored in the field until they were exhausted. When they came back home, it was gospel music, a church singing that lifted their spirits. When they went to church on Sunday after working like a dog all week long and were completely exhausted, it was the church music when they walked into the sanctuary that lifted their spirits. But my mother, with 4 children in the ghetto, when we got hungry, somebody from the church knocked on the door with a bag of groceries. The church is everything to our community.
Right.
And because so many of us have forgotten that and have walked in the opposite direction, not only do we have troubles in this country with those outside of our community, we have trouble inside of our community because we walked away from the one who's the trouble deliverer. Leave you with this. Before God called me to become a pastor, I went to a lot of different ministries. And I remember a young man, and I'm just trying to show how wonderful God is to our community and how we just missed this. And this is this is the heart of our problem. Not the racist Caucasian, the heart of our problem. We walked away from the one who's the deliverer. I was in the church, and there was a guy who, he could barely speak English properly. He was illiterate. And I remember sitting in the church, and the pastor asked him to come up and speak. And I was like, why would he do that? In front of the whole, that man was illiterate. So he went up there and he struggled mightily, just reading like 4 verses. And I kind of felt offended by the pastor. Why you do that to that man? And why you even ask him to do that? And I remember I just felt bad about it. And I felt upset with the pastor for doing that. And I kind of felt upset that he wasn't educated in the 20th century. And the guy shared a story with me that, man, this thing made me realize, Lord, we got to keep all these at the feet of Jesus.
Right.
He said, you know, Jones, he said, I never went to school. I said, what you mean I never went to school? He said, my father and mother had a little farm, and they needed me on the farm. He said, and I had to go out there and I had to plow. He said, I'm about 8, 9 years old.
Wow.
He said, and they got this ox up behind about 4 times my height. And they put me behind this ox. He said, and this ox is basically dragging me. I'm supposed to be plowing, but he's dragging me. He said, I'm doing my best. 8 years old, I'm doing my best. And I couldn't go to school because I had to help him out. He said, I couldn't even control it. He said, and the ox was dragging me so far. He said, I fell. He was going too fast. He said, when I fell down, oh Lord, he said, the ox stopped plowing and looked back at me and waited for me to get up.
Wow. Wow.
He said, the ox just stared at me. He says, I struggled and I got back up. Yeah, my head's a little small, this big old piece of planks. He said, I got back up and I put on. He said, and when I got back behind the plow, he said, I turned back around and went on plowing.
Wow.
God has been looking out for us, sir, from the time we entered the shores here as slaves. And our main problem, sir, is that we won't commit to the God who took care of us from day one. You've got to have courage and know who's behind you to get in good trouble.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
And if you walk away from one who's your supporter, how in the world can you accomplish anything? That's all I want to say, Bishop.
Right. Well, you just heard it from two powerful testimonies here about recounting some of their. I'm not that. These guys are older than me. Can you tell? No, I'll just play. I don't have any plowing stories. No. But powerful recounts of the first time that you saw raw racism. And the incident that you saw there with the plowing, 8 years old. Man, I just can't even imagine 8 years old trying to stand behind oxen plowing. And so these are some of the things, and we're going to talk about more experiences that the black people have gone through since the time of slavery up until now, and on our second segment, leading up to the importance of why we're going to be doing what we're going to be doing on Saturday.
Absolutely.
All right, and so before we get into this healthy conversation, this second segment, and we want you to stay tuned with us because we got a big announcement, and you don't want to miss it because we want your participation in what we're going to announce, the event that's going to take place on Saturday. But before we get into that conversation, we're going to go ahead. You mentioned gospel music, but we also got some jazz. You know, black folks know how to put that music down, don't we? Come on, give it up one more time for the best band in town, the Living Room Band with Darren Brown. Come on. We'll be right back. I'm telling, I was drifting on the memory while they was playing that. That's powerful. I'm telling you, we could have just went a whole. I might just do a musical marathon for one of the shows here on the living room. I think we might do that in July there as one of our fundraising activities, right, Brother Carl? Well, we're back. If you're just tuning in here to the living room, I'm with my special guests. I got the fellas on here with me tonight. I have the convener, the Honorable Carl Snowden, with me, and I also have, for the first time on the living room, we have Reverend Dr. Ricky Nelson Jones, Esquire. Just in case you didn't know, he's the attorney at law. All right, so we're back. We've been having a great conversation. What I love about the living room, and even though we say we try to contain it in an hour, but when you have a good conversation, we can leak over just a little bit, you know what I mean? And so, because it's on Facebook, we ain't got no NBC, we don't have no commercials, we don't have none of that. So we can say whatever we got to say to praise the Lord. And but I want to take this second segment in our conversation. We talked about what Congressman John Lewis had mentioned about getting into good trouble. We talked about pretty much how to get into good trouble. The reason why we have to get into good trouble is because when our foreparents were taken captive there in West Africa, and you know, from that point, and whether they say the time frame around 1619 could have been before that. I know in West Central Africa there, that it was before that, going into Brazil and the Caribbeans. But here in the North America, we know the documents state somewhere around 1619. Right. And but from there, we've been experiencing, our forefathers, our foreparents been experiencing from the time of slavery until what they considered to be the emancipation in 1865. Some of them didn't even get the message right away. That's why we celebrate Juneteenth. Right. And Phyllis T. Adams, if you don't know, we give a plug in. So that on Juneteenth this year in the city of Annapolis, we're going to have a powerful festival that Phyllis T. is putting together. Right. But even after that, we went through so much: the black codes, the Jim Crow laws, and lynchings, and redlining, and just you can enumerate better than I can recall. I've been privileged, you know, that a lot of these things that I was on the tail end of, and even though we have what we call, and we've seen the incident with George Floyd, right, what we call modern day lynchings, and things of that nature are still, it seems like every time we look up, there's some type of killing from the police, because now they have taken off white sheets and put on blue uniforms. And so this is the reason why we're talking about, and why John Lewis said, get into some good trouble, because this will continue if we don't stand up and fight.
Absolutely. I would say it's so important that people know their history. And there's a book that I recommend if you've not read it. It's called The Man Living Underground. It's by Richard Wright. And it's important for us to connect the dots in history. For example, if you ask the average person, where did the phrase "I can't breathe" come from? They'll say, oh, I remember it was Eric Gardner who said "I can't breathe" in 2014. Or they'll say it was George Floyd who said "I can't breathe" when he called his mother in May of 2020. But actually the phrase "I can't breathe" comes earlier than that. It comes during the Middle Passage, when they took African men and women, wow, put them in these hulls of these ships, packed them like sardines. I've seen that. Right. And then nature took its course. Right. Young women, periods came on. Right. Men defecated on themselves. It created such a stench that in these different languages, African languages, people were saying, "I can't breathe." Right. The oppression of black people, you can trace from the beginning of the time to the present. And we're going to talk about, I know, the civil rights piece, but something you're familiar with. There are more African American men and women who've been murdered by law enforcement. And the legal arguments that's always given is that police officers have to make a split-second decision. And so we leave it to them to make these judgments, and many times they're acquitted. And all you have to do is ask one basic question. If black police officers were killing white people at the same rate white police officers killing black people, would the answer be they only had a split second to make a decision? The answer would be no.
Right.
It would be unacceptable.
Right.
And so all we want to do is just create a society where people are treated fairly, or in the words of Dr. King, where they're judged by their character, not the color of their skin, but the content of their character. And so the vote, this precious vote, is under assault right now, all over the country.
Yes.
All over the country.
Yeah. And so we have to get in good trouble when it comes to voting now because of what we call voter suppression. And I know the Reverend Doctor knows, if you can kind of detail a little bit, that's why we have you on here to really talk to us about voter suppression.
Absolutely.
Maybe have some statistics and some things that we could do and to combat voter suppression.
It comes in many different forms, Bishop. I want to just talk about a few of them, share a few statistics with you. Voter suppression, polling place closures, voter ID laws, requiring proof of citizenship, discriminatory redistricting. In terms of closing these polling places, now keep in mind, Shelby County versus Holder was the case back in 2013 that really shifted everything. Because prior to that, when these states wanted to do some drastic change in the election process, they had to get pre-clearance from Washington, D.C. They couldn't just do this stuff. And in the Shelby County versus Holder case, talked about in the past, they had a formula that they used. And the formula was that if they were using some type of poll tax or something along these lines, or some type of testing, discriminatory testing, and what the courts would do, they would look at this, and then they'd look at the results of it. The results were a reduction in voter registration and and actually voting. So voter registration and showing up to vote.
Right.
It had such a devastating impact on our community that we really weren't voting. In comparison to Caucasians, the percentage was like, we talk about a difference like 60, 67%, 70% because of that. So the court said when we have these discriminatory tests, and then we see the results being a suppression of registration and voting, then we have to fashion a remedy. And that remedy was pre-clearance. So certain states that they were focusing on at that time, Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, North Carolina, and Virginia, had terrible laws and stuff in place that were basically cutting black folk out of doing anything in terms of voting, and we just got discouraged.
Right.
What the United States Supreme Court did in 2013 in Shelby County versus Holder was, they said, you know what? Time has passed by. Nowadays, we got, in those particular states I mentioned, we got more black folk registered to vote than white folk. And also they got black people in office in large numbers. So the Supreme Court said, well, we don't need to do that anymore. So what we're going to do is we're going to strike out this formula.
Okay.
So when you strike out the formula, that means Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act with pre-clearance, that falls by the wayside.
Wow.
So they struck the formula out because they said there's been such a drastic change. But what they didn't consider was that the pre-clearance requirement, the Voting Rights Act pre-clearance requirement, was the reason why we had a change.
Right.
So what they decided to do was we're going to strike all that down. And because of that, from 2013 when they did it, from about 2012 to 2018, there have been 1,688 polling places closed.
Wow.
214 of those were in Georgia alone. And according to Georgia, they got this Election Integrity Act of 2021. They're imposing voter ID requirements on absentee ballots, limits use of ballot drop boxes, reduces the amount of time people have to request an absentee ballot, makes it a crime for outside groups to give them food and water. The Supreme Court missed it.
Right.
They thought because of the good results of Section 4 and 5 of the Voting Rights Act, that okay, it's all over. We don't have this problem anymore.
Wow, that's
And,
crazy.
and Bishop, can I just kind of use as an analogy to make my point, if you'll allow me here? If I'm about to buy a big piece of property, farm property, because I got sheep, and the seller tells me, listen, got wolves out here, so you might want to think about a fence. And so while I'm talking to him, I see some wolves at a distance. So when I buy the property, I'm getting this steel fence, make sure it's deep, make sure it's high with barbed wire on top. I don't want them to kill my sheep.
Right.
If the sheep are safe and I never lose one for 50 years, you don't come to me and say, tear down the fence.
Right.
It seems to me, you need to,
You keep it in
before we even talk about the fence, I want you to go capture them wolves out there, make sure we got them all.
That's right.
Right.
Then we'll consider the fence.
That's right.
Right.
So what the Supreme Court did was they tore down the fence, and now the wolves have come in. So now we got these voter suppression tactics, like closing these polling places, can't give people food and water.
Right.
And these asking people for voter ID laws, proof of citizenship. Now, Bishop, help me understand this. Help me understand. Aren't you supposed to know who people are and that they are citizens before I even get my ballot in the mail?
Right.
What are you asking me to come and show that? I'm going to be honest with you. We are archaic with this whole voting thing. This ought to be online. If I can do my banking business online, all my personal information, we can vote online.
Wow.
Forget the polling places.
Right.
We still end up in the horse and buggy area. This is the 21st century.
Right.
Technology has flown through the roof.
Wow.
We should be able to vote online, sitting there eating a banana in my home.
Right.
But so now, because we're not moving forward with technology, now we sit up here, we got a problem if they close the voting place too early because we got to go out there and wait all day. What are you doing?
Right.
So the Supreme Court made that decision. They said things have changed. We don't need to. You got a formula that was used in the 60s. You're trying to use it now, but they didn't consider that the formula and the pre-clearance provision in Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act was the thing that kept these wolves in check.
Right.
And now, because they have stricken down Section 4, there's no more formula. Now the wolves have come out.
Right. So the
And that's what
wolves
we're dealing with.
the wolves are out now, and they're out, and we just had a major victory, if you will, for a great turnaround for our country from the national level. However, a lot of impact is made on the local level, and I know that in the city of Annapolis, there's going to be elections coming forth for the mayor and so forth, and then the following year, I know we have state delegates and things of that nature that's taking place. Gubernatorial, is that how you pronounce it? Race is taking place, comptroller, all kind of things that are taking place. And we have to start ringing the bell again, because we can't relax just because Joe Biden is in office and Kamala Harris is in office and we think that we can rest now. But we still have to stand in the good trouble and get in the way, because, like you said, even in Georgia, there's voter suppression going on, these laws that they're passing and so forth. And but we got to put people in. We got to make sure that people are in place, and our vote is what counts. Absolutely. So how do we sound that alarm, Brother Carl? Something is taking place? Let's share about what's taking place on this upcoming Saturday.
There is the NAACP, along with a host of other organizations, is planning to do a caravan, 100 cars or more. And people watching tonight, strongly encourage them to be part of this. Wherever you are living in Anne Arundel County on Saturday, May 17th, come to Annapolis. It's going to be at the Wall H. Base building in the rear. We're going to be getting people together. Now, to give people some sense of what is going on, this is part of a national campaign. 150 cities across the country on this coming Saturday are going to do something what we're going to do similar in Anne Arundel County. If you can just take a moment, if people could think about this for a second, imagine 100 cars coming through your neighborhood, just coming through the black community, 100 cars. What people will automatically think is, has somebody died? Is this a funeral? What's going on? Right. And the idea here is to create a buzz. These cars are going to be decorated with the image of John Lewis. They'll have placards on it. don't suppress the vote, get out and vote. It's designed to educate, energize, organize, and mobilize people. Because in Annapolis, in September, there's an election. And as Bishop pointed out, there will be an election 2022. And there will be an election in 2024. And we have to prepare people for the battle. I like the analogy, by the way, you gave, but the wolf and the sheep.
Yeah.
I like that analogy because what we have to understand is that the wolves are held, and they're being serious. They're not playing.
That's right.
Again, people who understand history, if you look at a phrase called Reconstruction, most people don't know this, but it's worth saying. Black people had Congress people in following the Civil War. There were United States Congress people as well as senators.
Right.
In Annapolis, Maryland, believe it or not, in 1873, the first black man got elected to the city council 8 years after the Civil War.
Wow.
Right?
Wow.
And then something happened in 1909. In 1909, the Maryland General Assembly passed what was called a grandfather's clause, which said if your grandfather couldn't vote,
That's right.
you can't vote.
Remember that?
Wow.
So when you were citing these polls closing, it's history repeating itself again. And we have to be wise enough to know our history, know that we're under attack, and we have to be able to get people prepared to deal with the wars that are coming. There are people that's in office today who are designing schemes that they call it gerrymandering that will take away the votes of black and Latino people, black and brown people. The polls that he was mentioning, those are closing. Most of those are being in African American, the majority black communities.
That's correct.
That's not by accident.
Right. Right.
It's not by coincidence. It's not by happenstance. And so the question becomes the Malcolm X question. You just got knocked down. What are you going to do? And so on Saturday, we're asking people to get up. And here's the great thing. It's what John Lewis was just understood so much. One of the pillars that Reverend Jones pointed out was when you said young people need to understand they can make a difference.
Yes.
Right.
So if you can show up at 2 o'clock with your car, you don't have to get out of it. Get in line with another 99 to 100 people in the car.
Right.
And just be a part of this historic event. Never in the history of this state have we had people gather together in cars, not on election day, but months before election day, telling our people the importance of voting.
Right.
It will create a buzz in our community, and it's one that we need. It's going to take about an hour and a half of people's time, and it's really not for them. It's for a generation yet unborn.
Right. Right. And you also mentioned going through the black neighborhood.
Absolutely.
So important because that's where the buzz need to be at, where we have to sound the alarm. And so those who may not have voted or are relaxing even on the fact of voting coming up in September.
Bishop, when people look up and see Reverend Jones driving his vehicle coming into Robinwood,
Right.
coming into Eastport Terrace, Bishop, when you're following it, when we have our leadership from these various organizations in cars,
Yeah.
what are these people on a Saturday driving in our neighborhood for?
Right.
Why are they stopping here? And the idea is to get people go through these neighborhoods. There's going to be a rally at People's Park where the Civil Rights Foot Soldiers Memorial is to help again to expound upon the importance of people voting. One last quick story that's worth repeating. You talked about the power of he who put wetness in water and allowed pigeons to fly, right? Can anybody who lived through this not understand where we are today? In Georgia, you're a Southern boy.
Yep.
You come from Louisiana, right?
Yes, sir.
In Georgia, somebody said, now wait a minute. Ain't no way in the world no black preacher gonna win in Georgia.
Right.
A Jew in Georgia? Are y'all crazy?
Yeah. Yeah.
John Lewis, good trouble.
Yes, sir.
John Lewis said, look, if we understand the power of the vote,
Right.
black people came out in Georgia and places that nobody had heard of. Little teeny towns.
right.
People showed up in great numbers. And the incredible happened. And people think when Georgia happened, it was the first time. It's not. Whenever we show up in great numbers, we make a difference.
Right, absolutely.
Ask somebody but Virginia and a man named Wilder,
Yep.
Governor Wilder,
Yep.
Doug
Yep.
Wilder, just showed up. Somebody said, ain't nowhere in the world you're going to have no black president. Y'all crazy? Barack Obama said, yes, we can.
Right.
So we know the power of the vote, but so do the wolves.
That's right.
And what they're trying to do is defang us, make it possible that we're weakened. So we hope to encourage people to come out this coming Saturday, show up, line up, and be part of this historic march. And what I would encourage people to do who are watching tonight, if you show up, you should bring two things. One, you should bring a child, a child, young person. Why? Because this young person will have an experience that they will never forget.
That's good.
These many black people showing up. Why? The importance of the vote. They'll never forget that. The second thing that I think is important for us as a community to understand is if you're not registered to vote, the NAACP is going to have a system set up that allow you to register
Yes, we will. Yes, we will.
to vote and to join the NAACP at the same time.
Right.
That's right.
So that in numbers, there's this great number. The caucus is a member of the NAACP, proudly a member of the NAACP. It's the oldest civil rights organization in the nation and the world.
That's right.
It's got chapters all over the world.
That's right.
So if we can, on May 17th, on May 8th, this coming Saturday, on May 8th, get people from all over the county to come to Annapolis at 2:00 p.m. to line up and be part of this great, great precision. Not for a funeral, not because it's a parade, but because we collectively understand this is an important moment in our history.
Yes, it is.
And somebody gonna take notice. Somebody gonna say, those people who we thought were asleep,
Yeah.
they woke.
And Bishop, I don't want people to miss this. This is critical what he's saying. And I got to make it my business to be there. This is critical. When I ran for the election for a vacant judgeship a couple of years back, so I'm campaigning, I'm going all over the place, spent $20,000 of my own money.
Right.
Running. I'm putting signs everywhere. So I'm over here, right here in Annapolis, I can't think of the name of the street right now, but I'm right here, so I'm walking over, I'm putting a big sign up, and a brother's walking down. I say, hey man, I need your vote. You know? I say, we gotta get out, we gotta get people from the community on the bench, man.
Right.
He's like, I don't vote.
Right. Wow.
So I said, it kind of surprised me for a minute, too. I said, man, it's the 21st century, tell me you don't vote.
Right.
I said, man, that's the king that died, people that died, what you talking? He said, I don't, I said, if you don't vote, will you just come and vote for me? He said, I don't vote.
Wow.
So this, it may not seem like it's big, but this is gigantic. We got people in the 21st century in our community walking around to my own vote. I couldn't believe it.
Right. And I'm glad that you said that because it's not just that person, but we hear this quite frequently. Sad to say, and people were under the notion, black people were under the notion that their vote doesn't matter because the same old white folks are going to be, running the world kind of thing. But we have shown and proved, especially now, through whether it was Obama or whether it was
Georgia,
there in Georgia, coming out in droves,
That's right.
knowing that that these numbers count, that our vote does count, and when we are away from the voting booth, then that counts too.
believe it.
See what I'm saying?
That's right.
For the wrong side,
know
they're
that
the
too
wrong
well.
team.
That's right.
Community, we know that too.
So our vote, we're trying to stress, so important that your vote matters, your vote counts, and that this Saturday's event at 2:00 is a very impactful. Leaders got together, strategized, and said, this is exactly what we need to do, what we call a votercade, where we're convoying to get caravanning together and going strategically into our communities and making some noise, like they say,
right.
and say that we have to vote. Now, where are we meeting at, Carl?
It's going to be at the Wally H. Base building, which is on Smithfield Street. It's in the rear of the building. It's in Annapolis. The cars will line up behind the building, And the route is to take people through major African-American communities along the Forest Drive corridor and then bring them back to Annapolis where the People's Park is. Do you have a number, Reverend, that you can give out for people who may want to call and get information that the NAACP?
The NAACP, they got the Google, just Google search NAACP Anne Arundel County, or you can go to NAACP at AnneArundelCounty.org. So either one.
And I just want
so you
to
get the information.
And I just want to share this one last thing, which is that on this coming Saturday, again, it's Saturday, May 8th, 2:00 p.m., the United Black Clergy, the Caucus of African American Leaders, the NAACP, the Deltas, there's a number of different organizations, AKA, all of the major organizations in the African American community, along with their allies, because there are whites and Latinos who are joining as well, have designated May 8th as the day. And what's going to be great about this, it's not going to be in just Annapolis. It's going to be all over the nation.
Right.
And what we want to do here in the state's capital, in Annapolis, is to be able to show that we have a large number of people who are awake. John Lewis' death was, he died at the age of 80. His contribution and the way people can honor him is by showing up.
Right.
John Lewis, as I told you, mother said to him when Dr. King died, if you really want to honor him, meaning Dr. King, pick up the baton. If people really respect John Lewis, if they really revere him, if they really think he's worth remembering, the best way to do that is to show up and do what he would do if he was living today.
Right.
John Lewis would be part of this effort if he was living. The last thing he did, the last speech he gave, was in Washington, D.C. There was a Black Lives Matter movement full of mostly young people. He was dying from cancer. He's 80 years old, he's fragile. He comes to this group
Showed up.
and he says to this audience of young people who looked at this frail old black man, and he said, get in good trouble. Never give up.
Right.
Get in good trouble. Never give up. Never give up. And that is what I think the theme of this event is. It's never giving up. It's a generation's call to action. And I'm looking forward to being a part of it. I'm going to bring my granddaughter because she needs to understand the kind of sacrifice that people made and why they made those sacrifices.
And if we don't remember our past, we're condemned to repeat it. Is that?
That's true.
Listen, 100 plus vehicles caravanning through our communities, and we're shouting and sounding the alarm that our vote matters, that our vote counts. Our forefathers, our foreparents died so that you can have a voice to vote. It would be a disservice
Yes, sir.
for me and for all that my parents had experienced, and my grandparents and those before them had experienced and underwent, for me to sit here and do nothing. And so if we want to make an impact and a change, come out and participate with us in what we call good trouble. And this is light good trouble to us, right?
Oh, yeah.
This ain't even, that strong good trouble stuff right here. This is really a celebration.
That's right.
And honoring John Lewis and honoring the fact that we can vote, and our foreparents that actually paved the way for us to have this kind of successful time in our lives. So come on out, participate. I believe it's going to be some music.
Going to be some music, going to be some young people who will also be there with poetry. It will be a good time. It's one of those moments. It's a family affair.
Family
We
affair.
have an opportunity to come together as a community and to celebrate and to be able to see the bigger picture. Martin King, Dr. King once said, the greatest march that an American can take in a democracy is to march on the ballot box. How true it is.
Right, right. And Carl, I remember the days, when I was in the military and every chance we got to be off work, and we would go down, I was at Fort Knox, and we would go down to Louisville, to Shawnee Park, And I'm telling you, there's about 300-400 cars, and everybody don't wash their cars, and they sporting the cars, and everybody don't even mind it, bumping, beeping the horn, hey, yelling at each other and talking, junk, and folks playing basketball. Good family time, like you said, just black folks everywhere. So if we can do that, and that didn't have no power behind it. For nothing. We can caravan and wash our cars and do whatever. Now we can go out and dress up our cars, if you will, with those signature things that we need to be able to sound the alarm that our vote count. Why can't we do that? Take a Saturday and say, hey, it shouldn't even be a sacrifice. I tell folks all the time at church, I say, look, you say Sunday that you sacrifice coming to church. You had to press your way to church. I'm like, I don't get it. What Jesus did on the cross, he pressed his way to the cross, but so that we can have a good time coming to church, be happy and excited about coming to church. We should be the same way, being able to participate in this historic event that's taking place nationally. And we can be a part of it for the first time this has ever taken place. I like being a history maker, if you will.
That's right.
I like participating in history.
Bishop,
Before we close, come on, Reverend Doctor.
I say, you say it's not a sacrifice. I say in church, I say, love Jesus the way he deserves to be loved.
Love Jesus the way he
done
deserves to be
everything
loved.
for you, and you can't be to church on time. I said, love him the way he deserves to be loved, which is similar to what you say. It's not a sacrifice.
And some of them don't even be on time on Facebook Live.
Zoom.
And they right at home and still not on time. But that's a whole. We got a lot of prayer to do there, Reverend Doctor.
That's what we got to do.
Listen, we're out of time, but we're not out of conversation. We're going to be still talking even beyond the role of this camera, because a conversation has to be had, and so that we can continue to have progress. Great milestones have been taking place in our country. Thank you, Brother Carl, for paving the way for young men like myself and my son who are looking up to you and saying and all the advice that you're giving us and allowing us to jump into this struggle as it's continuing together, along with the Reverend Doctor from HOCO, Howard County, doing a great work there, and also Baltimore City, where he's standing right there before those judges, and he's making a clarion call on behalf of our people. Listen, thank you so much for joining us. It is the Living Room. Oh, I got to let everybody know that next week, I know I had told Brother Carl that I wanted to continue to do the joint effort there with the caucus, but next week my bishop will get on me if I don't have him on next week. So we're gonna have to we'll pick it up in July.
Okay, not a problem.
June. We'll pick it up in June, and then that way I have it scheduled out where we don't have to worry about that anymore. But I had him on his schedule for next Tuesday.
I understand.
Look, I don't want to get in trouble with my bishop here, right? And listen, and Reverend Doctor, you may want to even tune in on next Tuesday.
Yes.
Our theme or hot topic for next Tuesday is the black church in trouble?
Wow.
All right, I'll be in. Good Lord, say the same. I'm tuned in.
Archbishop Ralph Dennis is going to come and be my guest. That's my bishop. He's going to come, and we're going to have a healthy discussion on is the black church in trouble? And then our subtopic is, what's up with all these titles? I think Carl may want to know what's going on with that. I know we had the caucus meeting, but we're going to have it recorded. You can go back and watch it. We're going to talk about these titles, that all these titles.
That's right. So I'm going to get that. I'm to record.
It's archived, so you can go back and look at it.
I want to see that.
Yeah, because everybody, so whether you're in the church or even out in the world, don't even know about the church, everybody said, what's going on with all these titles that everybody got in these churches? So like everywhere I got somebody that got 3 members, he's the Pope. So we're going to talk about all these titles and how they may be helping or hindering the church. And so you want to make sure that you stay tuned with us and be with us next week right here at 7 o'clock p.m. on the Living Room, where real conversations take place. God bless you, and we're out of here.
Welcome to the living room. Welcome to the living room where real conversations take place. Dear listeners, viewers, supporters, fans, friends, or family of the show, we are honored to have you here to share your time, your thoughts, and experiences with us. This was created to be a safe but truthful space, and with truth comes light, You know, in the living room. Welcome to. It's the living room.